relator, maximizer, arranger, significance, and achiever. My name is Sapidah Shefa, and I'm the Vice President of Operations at Roadrunner Sports. My biggest aha moment around learning my strengths was really around the basements and the balconies of your strengths. When you're in the balcony is the positive side. When you're energized and you're leading with those strengths and you're doing it a positive way, it's obviously going to drive great results. You've also got to be very self-aware about the basements, the other side of those strengths. And those tend to show up when you're under pressure sometimes, or you're stressed, or when you're not engaged. And so it's important to understand both sides of it and to be able to recognize when you're strong and when you're in that basement and how to pull yourself out of it.
I'm Darren Verisami.
I'm Brandon Miller.
And this is The Strengths Whisperer,
the show empowering leaders to create, build, and sustain great places to work.
On this episode, we have Sapidah Shefa, VP of Operations for Roadrunner Sports. Welcome to the show, Sapidah.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. We're really excited to tell your story. But before we get into how you've been building Roadrunner into a company that will outlast you, let's talk about you. Now, Sapidah, you've been working with strengths personally and professionally for the past few years now. I just wanted to jump right in by asking, can you share a little bit about your personal story with strengths?
When I first discovered my strengths, it was actually quite eye-opening. At the same time, it was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, because it's very comprehensive in terms of who you are and how you operate. And it just validates a lot of things you think and you know about yourself. And it also validates the areas where you're not that strong. And so it was like, aha, I get it. Okay. This is why I do things this way. This is why I operate in this manner. I've done personality tests, things like that in the past, but nothing has been as comprehensive and as close to who I am than StrengthsFinder.
Sapidah, thank you for sharing that. And now let's go ahead and do a dive into your strength. And so with number one relator, maximizer, arranger, significance, achiever, when you first saw your results, which strength resonated with you the most and why?
Oh, they all did.
That's a great answer, by the way.
They all did. But the one that it didn't catch me off guard, but it made a lot of sense to me, was the significance. And the reason why that is because it just really helped me understand how in the past, decisions I've made about my career and opportunities, why I made them the way I did. And it just validates in my mind that I did the right thing. And with significance, I want to make sure I'm making an impact. I want to make sure that I'm doing things that are going to really be valuable. And frankly, I like to be recognized too. So for my accomplishments. But yeah, that one I was like, oh, okay. I can get behind that.
I appreciate you jumping right to significance. You know, the strengths show up in varying degrees of frequency. And this is after 28 million people have taken the StrengthsFinder. And significance is one of the rarest three. So it is a very unique strength to have show up in your top 5. I think last count, it's less than 6% of people ever have that strength go into their top 5. And that's a comparison to, you happen to have 2 really common strengths. So achiever is the most common. That's about a third of people. And relator is the 4th most common. So we see a lot of relator, a lot of achiever. So those are a little more recognized. And I know you'll meet more of those folks. Significance, not quite as many. And so I love how you open that up. And so a little bit more about significance. Sapidah said it well. You want to do things that matter, that have an impact, that I hear many say that go beyond me, that get to take me further than what I see now. Sapidah, we also have met people with high significance that sometimes struggle with owning this one because they look at it and they think, gosh, do I really need to acknowledge I want and need recognition? Do I need to acknowledge that I do seek outstanding performance. And if my name is going to be on it, it needs to be not just good, it needs to be great. When you hear that, does that resonate with you? Have you been aware that it is a unique strength, not only in the context of work, but maybe even beyond that as you look back at life?
When I first read about this strength and got to understand it better, I really latched on to, you guys call it the balconies and the basements, and you'll probably get into that. I really latched on to the balcony side of it. The basement, the flip side is you're needy or you're recognition hungry. And I don't see myself as being that necessarily. And that could be because I'm energized by this strength and I'm operating from a balcony's perspective. But to your point, I want to do meaningful, impactful work in my professional life. I want to make an impact on the people's lives that are in my personal life. And, I want to help them see that there's more to life. And so when I do that, when I coach my sisters, my friends, and I love coaching people. I love giving advice. It makes me feel good when they say, hey, I tried what you said and boy, look what happened. So it could be recognition, yes, but it's also it validates to me that mattered. That made a difference.
Sapidah, thank you, because what you just outlined is something that I think as people learn about their strengths and they do understand that for every strength we have that has the potential for amazing good, there is this other piece of it, this sometimes called the shadow side or the hindrance side or the basement as some have referred to it. And for some, it turns them off. They actually think, oh, I don't want to own that. I don't want that to be said of me. And yet here you are, you're embracing the best parts of it and yet acknowledging, yeah, I don't think that's who I am. And so I want to ask you a question and you could pick one of two ways. So I either take us professional or take us personal, because you started down like coaching others, but I know you have a professional. Where do you find significance contributing to your success?
I'll go professional because I've actually recently had these conversations with Chuck Abood, who has been my mentor, boss for 20-something years. And I was able to tell him in our last one-on-one that I love what I do. I love my job. And I get to be part of the most impactful programs at Roadrunner Sports. Employee engagement is our number one initiative, and I get to lead that. Strategy. It's a huge part of an organization, thinking about the future, setting your goals and your targets. I run strategy. So for someone who has high significance and to be positioned in a role that really plays to that strength, I'm in heaven. I love going to work. I love it.
We often talk about the paradigm of how people show up at work: engaged, disengaged, actively disengaged. And what we all just heard is the sound of engagement. That's what engagement sounds like. That I love to go to work. I look forward to my job. I'm positioned to get to do what I do best. Thank you, Sapidah.
Yes, of course.
When we build from the conversation that was just had and we think of a leader that is engaged in their work, it's important for us to think about how does that cascade to the rest of the organization. I love to say you're not going to squeeze an orange and ever get tomato juice from it, because it just doesn't work that way. And oftentimes organizations will move in employee engagement and strengths trainings and team building, and they'll say, well, that just needs to happen downstream. That doesn't need to take place in the leadership realm. I don't have time for that. But if we don't get that alignment at the most senior levels of leadership, we're not necessarily going to have it transition down. We clearly have phenomenally engaged leader in Sapidah. And Sapidah, I want to ask you, take us through the Road Runner journey, because if I'm not mistaken, you had your executive team and your board of directors team go through the Strengths Finder. What we've talked about thus far in today's episode is more of your personal journey and the self-awareness and the awakening. Each member of the team at Roadrunner in the executive and directorate level went through some of that self-awareness, but that is now converted over time to team awareness. How did that self-awareness that each person gained transition into that team awareness?
We are a team of doers. We will get it done. And we will not run short of things to do because we'll find more things to do to move the company forward. And as a team, what we learned was we are a team of high achievers at the executive level and at the director level. And as a team, we will tend to take on as much as we can and then pile on more on top of that. And we realize that when you do that, it has that trickle down effect, right, to your employees and your team members. And we just had to recognize that we need to make sure we're laser focused and that we have our priorities set. And anything that comes our way that's outside of those priorities, we need to really take a strong look at it and make sure it makes sense for us to do it, or is it just because it's a shiny object? So we are high achievers. And other thing that came out of it is we're very low on the empathy side. It's in the bottom 5 for, I think, most of the executives on our team. And so when you're an achiever and you're low on empathy, you don't take that step back and see how it impacts the rest of the team. And we're doing that now.
I know that was a starting point for you. How has that seed of where things started, how's that kind of continued to ripple in the iterations? Because it's been a few years now that Roadrunner has been working within the context of strengths and really working to become a strengths-based organization.
So today we have implemented a priorities tracking. So we have 6 priorities that as a company we are focused on. And those are the 6. And every department, their priorities tie back to those 6. And so we've made a big effort to reduce the fire drills, to reduce the everything needs to happen now mentality to let's be laser focused and do these 6 things really well. And if we do these 6 things really well, we're going to beat our expectations and our goals. And by the way, the number one thing, as I mentioned before, is employee engagement. That has never been a top initiative for Roadrunner Sports. It is today.
Number one priority, everybody, is employee engagement. I repeat that. Number one for Roadrunner Sports is employee engagement. That is the priority that they've made. When we talk about becoming a great place to work, you've got to do that by design and intention. I don't know what clearer example you need of intention than what Sapidah just said. They've made that a clear focus for them as a company. You have perfectly segued into the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is, let's talk about the employee story. Let's talk about their experience. What does employee engagement mean to Roadrunner Sports? And how did you make it a priority? Because you'd been in business, I think, when this started for over 35 years at the time, right?
39 years now.
39 years now. Yeah. So it was beyond 35 when we started.
Yeah, it was 37 years, I think, when we started. The way, we focused on employee engagement is it's not a one size fits all process. We've done multiple things. It starts with surveying the team and seeing where they're at and having that baseline. That's what we did first. We took a survey, we got our baseline, we knew where we were doing right by our team and where we had opportunities. Then we put a plan of action in place. And we've continued that, and we update the team on a regular basis, letting them know, here's what you said, here's what we're doing. Here's what you said, here's what we're doing. And so the team can see the progress that we're making as a result of the feedback that they shared with us. Number 2, we've implemented a company-wide leadership training program. It's called Rise Academy. We've never had such a comprehensive training program for our leaders. Our retail leaders had a training program, but it didn't resonate throughout the whole company. Now we have that. So our team feels that they're getting the development that they're looking for, the growth that they're looking for. And then I will say we focused very heavily on materials and equipment and really understanding from the team, what are your pain points? What are the areas that keep you from being able to do your job effectively? What are things that we can do to improve the tools that you have? And we took action. And then finally, I'll say, Darren, recognition. You think everyone gets that, right? You think as a leader, you get it. You have to recognize your team. People stay at companies for leaders and they leave companies because of their leaders. And a lot of that time, it's because they're not getting recognized. They're not being told that what they're doing is important and what it means to the company. So we've doubled down on recognition. We have a playbook. We have a program that every department participates in, and every quarter, someone in every single department gets recognized company-wide. And then we have departmental recognition programs so that the teams are regularly getting recognized by their leaders and by others in the organization. And so we've made that part of our culture.
For the benefit of our listeners, what tool are you using to measure employee engagement?
It's called the Q12. It's by Gallup, from what I understand. And it's actually 13 questions. But it starts with the basic needs. And then it builds upon that, right? Here's the basic needs, and then here's how you grow. And we take that survey. We've taken it twice. We're about to take it a third time. And engagement on that survey is measured by percentages. And I think the baseline is somewhere around 35% is where most companies land. And when we first took it, we were in that range. We put a lot of focus on it. We took it again last year and we improved our score by 35%. And we're taking it again with the hope that we're going to be above 70%. That number is important. That 70% engagement is great and it's very important. But more than that, even, we want to get feedback. So we're really encouraging our team to give us honest, open feedback, completely anonymous, and it's in free form. We got so much out of that part from the last survey, and all of our action plans has tied back to that feedback.
I'm curious for also our listeners, when you think about the comparison, so you're doing the work of initiating an approach, a training, you're measuring outcomes. What part do you think Strengths has played in the success of your efforts as you are monitoring engagement and then probably looking at other key performance indicators?
Well, I think it's helped in our success around engagement because we understand now how to energize our team and positioning our team to be able to play to their strengths. There's so many leaders and leadership programs that focus on people's weaknesses. And if, you're great here, but we need to focus on this area where we can improve. We need to improve this area. And what leaders need to understand is, no, you don't. You don't have to focus on that. How about focusing on your strengths and help building that person's strengths? And then bringing other team members in collaboration that may have this other strength that this person doesn't have. So then you have a high performing team. And that's what we've taken away. And that's what we've really learned from this whole process.
I'm going to go back to a comment you made. You said that we as a team were very high in achiever, but as a team, we're not high in empathy. And I think for some who are listening who have already started doing some work with strengths and they have strengths whisperers inside of their organization, people who are helping coach. What are some things you've done as a leadership team to come around that empathy and still show some of those qualities as a team?
The first thing I'll point out is we have rolled out a company-wide one-on-one agenda. Every leader has a one-on-one with their team member. And the very first thing on that one-on-one is a celebration. Let's celebrate something that you're proud of. And by the way, which strength were you leading with while you were accomplishing that achievement, we'll call it. That agenda is also broken out where it talks about workload. I want to know what your workload is. I want to know your grind, great, and genius. And it really helps the manager or the leader that's having that one-on-one you're almost forced to be empathetic. You have to listen, and you have to care, and you have to help that team member prioritize and manage their workload. Again, that's part of your job as a leader, and you're providing opportunities for development. There's recognition tied into it. So that's one of the examples. We also have monthly coaching conversations with our team members, and this ties back to the Q12 survey. So every month, one of the questions is highlighted from that Q12, and we have a separate coaching conversation where we get to talk to that team member to see where they're at. Between a 1 to 5, where are you? And if you're not a 5, what can I do to help you get there? What can I do to take away or minimize the hurdles that keep you from getting to a 5?
Sapidah, I believe you also mentioned when we were chatting before the show that your managers are using a tool called Grind, Greatness, and Genius. And this is a little bit of what you explained. Seems to be pretty powerful for people to use this framework, even if they haven't yet touched the CliftonStrengths assessment. Can you share a little bit about how that looks and how that even falls into celebrating good times? I don't need to start singing right now, but how has it been used as a framework?
Well, grind is those tasks that you have to do, but you don't get excited. You don't wake up in the morning and go, I get to go and answer 100 emails today, and I get to go and sit in on 5 meetings that I'm not going to participate in, or whatever. For me, it's admin work. Oh my gosh, that is such a grind for me. It's like scheduling meetings, and I have to do that, obviously. But that's grind. It's stuff that you have to do that you're not really excited about. We want that to be less than 50%. We understand that, like I said, there's things you have to do. You can't get around it, but we want it to be less than 50%. Ultimately, we'd like to get to 30% grind, 70% great and genius. And great and genius is the things you look forward to. As I mentioned earlier, I get to lead engagement and strategy. Well, those are genius areas for me. So when I'm working on strategy, or I'm working on employee engagement and putting plans together and looking at what's the next step and what's the direction, how are we going to get this implemented, that's genius work for me. For someone else whose strengths may fall under a different area, their genius might be different. They might enjoy emails, I don't know, but they're great and genius. It's what energizes you to perform at your very best.
If I'm hearing you correctly, just clarify this for me. Somebody's genius zone might be another person's grind zone. Is that fair to say? And when we actually discuss this openly and we can own that, hey, I can do this and I despise doing this, it actually opens up the conversation to be had amongst the team. Well, hey, maybe we need to shift a little bit about who's doing what within the team, because it's bringing energy in different ways. Is that fair to say that's how you've used that successfully?
Absolutely. I'll give an example. For me, a grind is when I have to put together documents and steps on how to do certain things, or documents around communication. And so it just, to me, that's not energizing. I'll say that word again. But I have a team member who is very detail oriented, who loves SOPs, and that's genius for them. They get to put together a process, and they get to do step 1 through step 10. And this is, you do first, you do next, and that's genius for them. So what did I do? Whenever something like that comes across and I'm able to, I delegate it to this other individual who loves working on that stuff. That's how it works.
And the fascinating part with that is oftentimes we don't love the work, but we love the outcome, right? So those 10 steps, that SOP, we're like, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to build that. But my gosh, do I appreciate somebody who can, and the ripple that it has for us organizationally. And that takes us back to a point that you made that was discovered in the Q12 process. I actually want to ask Brandon a little bit of his expertise on here. Recognition. When we start having these conversations about different people's grind areas, their greatness and their genius zones, it actually opens up for there to be a shift in work And it opens up the door for us to actually recognize and validate people's strengths of what they're doing and how that comes together. Brandon, recognition.
When we think about recognition and the science behind it, Sapidah is exactly right that leading with a focus on seeing what people do well and giving the comment, giving the just due reward to doing a good job, because we will see back what we reinforce. If we want to see and experience and hear things that are important to us, positive reinforcement will over time outweigh negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement it's a hack. It's a cheater's shortcut to try to get something done, but it doesn't sustain because the energy behind it is negative. I'm doing this because I'm afraid that you're going to criticize, call me out. You're going to make me feel a certain kind of way that I don't want to feel. So recognition is a long play. It's an understanding that positive reinforcement and that energy actually can sustain the performance longer. So scientifically, when we think about recognition, you could break it down to how many times does Sapidah need to hear she's doing a good job she talked about her mentor, Chuck. How many times does she need to hear that? And what we've learned is it's about 3 times a month as an average. 3 times. It helps if it's specific, if it's measured, if it's tied to something that Sapidah can look and go, hey, thanks, I did do that. I did, a little shake off the shoulders, like, yeah, I feel good about that. And it's okay for Sapidah to acknowledge that when she receives it, some recognition is going to be 5 out of 5. That was the most amazing recognition I ever got. Please do that again 100 more times. Or recognitions that's like, that might have felt like you had to. And then be able to offer that back, because recognition, for those of us learning to do it, or some of us great, 3 times a month is a minimum. We encourage you to shoot for 5. Shoot for 5. Because if you're playing to a person's strengths, it's highly likely when you talk about that genius versus grind, when they're in that strength zone, it's probable you're going to see things to recognize. And don't hoard it, share it, because that makes a huge difference.
Sapidah, I want to ask you on the heels of what Brandon just said, have you found that recognition is the same for everybody? Like, everybody likes public recognition, or everybody likes individual? Or if you had to kind of take the time, or have your managers take the time to identify what types of recognition are most meaningful to different people? Have you seen anything like that? And what's that been like?
As I mentioned, we have monthly coaching conversations, and each month is a different question from the Q12. Well, recognition is one of those conversations that we have with every single employee, and you ask them, what type of recognition do you like or do you want? Some people want a lot of public recognition. Some people just want you to send them an email, and that's good for them. Some people just want you to stop by their desk. Some people want you to give them a gift card. We get to that level of detail in that coaching discussion around recognition with every team member. So now I know, as a matter of fact, we have a company-wide recognition every quarter. And we go out to the team members ahead of time and say, you're going to be recognized. You've won this award. Your peers have recognized you. We're going to announce it. Are you comfortable with that? And most people will say yes, but there are those few that say, no, I'm not comfortable. And we can recognize that and appreciate that. And so they'll receive a personal recognition.
It's so powerful to understand those nuances, because if we recognize somebody in a way that they're uncomfortable being recognized, it actually can have a counteracting effect on that recognition. I'll never forget, I was once in a session with a group of leaders. There was about 9 of them that were coming together. That was their first time working together. And we just went around, asked that same question that Sapidah just shared of like, well, how do you like to be recognized if you've accomplished something? Literally everybody went around and they said, well, just a simple thank you is fine. Now, me, as you can tell, I like asking a lot of questions. I says, can you give me something specific? What does that mean? And they all looked at me like, Darren, you are really annoying. It's simple, a simple thank you. How much more complex will this be? So the first leader goes and says, well, okay, for me, a meaningful thank you, simple thank you, is not thanking me, but thanking me for what my team did. It shows me that you see the work that my team is doing and I can validate them. Next leader goes and says, well, a meaningful thank you for me, simple thank you, is telling me how the work that I did and that my team did fits into the bigger picture of the organization. I'm not going to go through all 9 leaders, but there was 9 drastically different responses, up to and including that gift certificate point that you mentioned. Like, if you really want to let me know that I've done something fantastic, bring me a brand muffin from this particular bakery and leave it on my desk. Those pieces, like, you start just digging a little bit more, even when you get that initial response, because so many times people have not thought of how they like to be recognized. But when you dig a little deeper, it's really powerful to get into that space where we explore. It's like, tell me a little bit more. What has a successful time been like? And I know that's been folded into the culture at Roadrunner. The question that I want to take us to is, you've clearly done some significant work at Roadrunner with building culture, with honing Q12, focusing on different questions around there. Can you share a story of how an employee has actually been empowered through this process and has completely shifted, made a big difference at work?
I'll give you an example of one of my team members. Her name is Jessica Thibault. And Jessica she's been with the company almost as long as I have, I think 23 years. She's always been in a training and development role. And she's contributed immensely to the success of Roadrunner. But her team has always been so small. And the amount of work that they're doing and supporting everybody in the organization is tremendous, right? We have a lot of employees. And so through this process, we learned that we need to position Jessica that will make her feel more impactful, that will really help her feel that she's recognized for all that she's done around employee development and training, and position her to really lead the charge around engagement. So Jessica was promoted right around this time in the last 2 years to the director of employee engagement. She went from training and development manager to now director of employee engagement, and she will be the best advocate you'll ever find around this. And the work that she's done working with you guys and your team and taking what you guys have built with 34 Strong and making it fit for Roadrunner Sports and bring our culture into it and our style, she's amazing. And that's her in her element. And we were able to recognize that through this process and position her in a way that what she's doing will be her genius.
Thank you for sharing that. It's always powerful to hear how this transforms different people, and it transforms the organization in these little small catalysts for change.
So Sapidah offered a great perspective of identifying the strengths in a team member and finding a pathway for their growth and development. A strengths-based culture is highly focused on performance and excellence in performance. So going all the way back to significance. Someone like Sapidah is going to have an eye for those strengths and to see who can perform in that way, and then look for opportunities to give people room, give them space to rise up to the place where their strengths can start to fully express, where they can grow. Sapidah, I imagine when you move Jessica up that way, she probably doesn't know all there is to know about being a great director yet. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
And therein lies the coaching opportunities. Therein lies the opportunity to say, hey, you made it here. Congratulations. And now let's figure out the full scope of this role. And let's look at all of the ways that your strengths can play into this with an eye even for what's out there later, right here and now. And what you heard Sapidah say about those intervals of coaching, those conversations, that space where I'm coming to connect with you to help grow and develop you, is a major part of when we see strengths really connect and grow in an organization.
It's so important to help develop someone in their current role, but we're talking about their next role. We're having these coaching conversations and we're talking about, where do you want to go? So let's get you as far in your current role, but let's have our eye on something bigger. And it helps team members. It empowers them to say, yeah, I can reach that goal. I can reach that level. And here's my plan to make that happen. So yeah, I have to agree with what Brandon just said.
I don't know, everybody. Running awesome culture and a commitment to employee engagement for the long haul. I don't know. If I was in the market for a job, I know where I'd be knocking on the door, hoping that they would hire me at Roadrunner. Wow. And this is the brilliance of creating your culture by intention and design and focusing on becoming a strengths-based organization. We've got to do the work over time. And just like in running a marathon, and Roadrunner does really support the running industry, you can't just go out and run that marathon cold. Well, I suppose you could if you've done no training, but you're really going to feel it. You're going to do some longer term damage. We've got to build the intervals to build up to that tolerance of going through. Building culture is no different, and it's the process and the journey of continually doing that through all areas, coaching and developing where somebody needs to be right now and where they're going to. And we've heard that embodied today from Sapidah. Thank you so much for your insights today, Sapidah. Sapidah, if people would like to learn more about you, connect with you, or learn more about Roadrunner and connect with Roadrunner, where could they go about doing that?
We have our website, roadrunnersports.com. We have 43 stores across the United States, and those locations are on our website. And I will say, please, if you have an opportunity, go visit our stores, because the experience you're going to get is out of this world. And you'll find that we have such a highly engaged and passionate team in our stores across the company. And we provide a personalized fit experience where we will measure your feet, scan it, and tell you exactly based on that what kind of shoes are going to help you be comfortable, obviously, but help you stay active. So it's a great experience, but you're going to get to work with some amazing people in our stores over the phone as well in our support center. For me personally, you could reach me at Shefa, S as in Sam, Shefa at roadrunnersports.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Look for Sapidah Shefa.
And we will have spelling and contact information listed as well in the episode notes. Think of that. Roadrunner's mission is very much aligned with their culture. They are aligned with creating successful processes for runners, with getting the shoes fitting and comfort and aligned for them to sustain for the long haul. And now they're taking what has made their business a success for so many years and for so many runners across the globe, and they're applying that same process to the employee side, to the very lifeblood of their organization. So powerful to see that. Thank you, Sapidah, for joining us and sharing your story and the Roadrunner journey thus far. Now, for our listeners, I want to ask, are you ready to discover your strengths to accelerate into life like Sapidah has done for herself personally and for Roadrunner? We believe in this so very much that we are offering our listeners the opportunity to discover their top 5 Clifton strengths. If you are interested and you'd like to learn more about that, email us at Brandon, BRANDON, at 34strong.com. And that's the number 34 followed by the word strong.com. Once again, that's Brandon at 34strong.com. All you got to do is include in the subject line top 5 to request your Strengths Finder code, and we'll get the ball rolling from there.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Strengths Whisperer. What did you take away from the conversation with Sapidah? We'd love to know. Just email us at Brandon at 34strong.com. Again, if you are ready to discover your top 5 strengths, include the word top and the number 5 in the subject line.